My brother was having an affair with my fiancée, and my father gave him the family business and house, so I made them. Michael, 33M, had spent his entire life learning that effort and success did not guarantee recognition, at least not in his family. His younger brother Alex, 30M, had been labeled the miracle baby from the moment he was born, a title that seemed to grant him immunity from accountability and failure. Their father, a proud but deeply biased man, never hesitated to remind Michael of the expectations placed upon him. "You're the eldest," he would say. "You need to set an example." But what he really meant was that Michael needed to be perfect while Alex was allowed to fail, over and over again, without consequence. From a young age, Michael had understood that he was held to a different standard. At 15, while most kids his age were worrying about school dances and summer vacations, he was already working in their father's electrical business. The work was grueling, long hours spent running wires through tight crawl spaces, hands raw from stripping cables, his body aching at the end of every shift. But he didn't complain. He learned. He absorbed every detail of the trade until he could handle jobs better than men twice his age. His father never praised him, never acknowledged the skill he had developed. Instead, he would nod curtly, as if Michael's competence was expected, not something to be appreciated. Meanwhile, Alex was a disaster. It started small: poor grades in school, detentions for skipping class, half-hearted attempts at sports that ended with him quitting after a few weeks. But no matter what Alex did wrong, their father would dismiss it with a casual, "He just needs time." When Alex barely graduated high school, their father didn't scold him. Instead, he insisted that Alex was too bright for traditional education and pushed him into college. Michael, despite having the intelligence and work ethic to excel academically, had never been given the option. "The business needs you," his father had told him. And that was that. College was another failure for Alex. He partied through his first year, skipped exams, and eventually dropped out, blaming unfair professors and rigid expectations for his lack of success. Their father still refused to hold him accountable. Instead of demanding that Alex get a job or contribute to the family business, he funded Alex's ridiculous business ideas. First, it was a clothing brand, thousands of dollars poured into custom-printed hoodies that nobody wanted to buy. Then, it was cryptocurrency, which ended in disaster when Alex lost everything in a pump-and-dump scheme. The worst was the real estate investment. Alex had convinced their father to buy into a rundown property, promising to flip it for profit. Instead, he mismanaged the project so badly that the house was left half demolished, condemned by the city before it could be sold. Through it all, Michael continued to work. By the time he was in his mid-20s, he had essentially taken over the family business. He modernized their operations, introduced new technologies, and built relationships that secured them bigger, more lucrative contracts. Under his leadership, the company flourished. But instead of acknowledging his success, their father credited Alex for his entrepreneurial spirit and insisted that he be involved in the business, despite Alex having no skills, no discipline, and no interest in actual work. The favoritism was humiliating. Michael would come home after 12-hour shifts, exhausted and covered in dust, only to find Alex lounging on the couch, playing video games. Their father would be right there, acting as if this was normal. "Your brother has a lot on his mind," he would say, as if Alex's failures were some grand intellectual burden. Michael tried to reason with their father once. He laid out everything in stark detail. The business thrived because of him, not Alex. He had earned the right to be treated as more than just the family's workhorse. But his father shut him down. "Alex has potential. He just needs support. You can handle things on your own." That was when Michael understood the truth. His hard work would never matter. He was valuable only as long as he kept the business running, kept bailing Alex out of his failures. His father didn't see him as a son. He saw him as a tool, a safety net for the favored child. And yet, despite everything, Michael kept working. Because if he didn't, there wouldn't be a business left to save. Michael met Sophie, 29F, on a routine electrical job, never expecting that the woman inspecting his work that day would change the course of his life. She was a property manager, sharp-eyed and quick-witted, effortlessly commanding respect from contractors twice her age. Unlike most people he met through work, Sophie didn't look down on electricians. She understood the labor, the skill behind it, and, to Michael's surprise, she actually seemed interested in it. Their first conversations were about circuits and construction codes, but that quickly turned into discussions about their pasts, their ambitions, and the lives they wanted to build. Sophie was different from anyone Michael had known. She was efficient, no-nonsense, and relentless when it came to solving problems. But she was also warm in a way that made Michael feel something he hadn't before appreciated. She saw his dedication, his intelligence, and instead of brushing it aside as expected, she admired it. It wasn't long before admiration turned into something more. They started dating, their connection deepening over shared late nights at work and quiet moments at home. Sophie didn't just love him, she respected him. That was something he had never gotten from his own father, from anyone in his family. For the first time in his life, Michael felt like he had a true partner. Someone who didn't just see him as a worker, a fixer, a problem solver, but as a man worth something. After 2 years together, they moved in. 4 years later, he proposed. There was no hesitation in her answer, yes. Michael was finally on the path he had always dreamed of. A wedding, a home, a family. A future where he wasn't just the one holding everything together, but someone who was building something of his own. Sophie didn't just become his fiancée, she became a key part of the family business. She had an instinct for organization, overhauling the company's scheduling system, streamlining invoicing, and locking down contracts that their father had always been too careless about. Under Michael and Sophie's leadership, the business became more efficient, more profitable than it had ever been before. Clients stopped dealing with their father entirely, going directly to Michael or Sophie instead. And though his father never admitted it out loud, Michael knew he resented it. But the real problem was Alex. Even as Sophie worked to stabilize the company, Alex remained the unshakable disaster in the middle of it all. Despite his string of failures, their father refused to let him go. Instead, he found ways to keep Alex involved, insisting he was learning the ropes, while Michael did all the actual work. Alex barely showed up to jobs. When he did, he made careless mistakes, miswiring circuits, forgetting to order materials, even leaving live wires exposed. Clients began to complain, but their father always had excuses. He just needs experience. Michael, you need to guide him better. As if it was Michael's responsibility to fix yet another one of Alex's failures. One day, Alex failed to show up for an important contract, leaving Michael and Sophie scrambling to cover for him. When Michael confronted him, Alex just laughed. Relax, man. It's just a job. Yeah? And whose job do you think keeps this company from falling apart? Michael snapped. Yours, Alex smirked. That's why Dad lets you handle it. He knows you'll clean up after me. Michael clenched his fists, but there was nothing he could say to that. Because it was true. But the worst part? Their father refused to see it. No matter how many contracts Alex jeopardized, no matter how much money he cost them, the favoritism never wavered. And then came the moment Michael realized just how deep the betrayal ran. One evening, Michael and Sophie sat at the kitchen table, buried in paperwork, when Sophie's expression darkened. She stared at the company's accounts, flipping between pages, her brow furrowing. What is it? Michael asked. Sophie didn't answer right away. She just turned the papers toward him. Money was missing. Not just a little. Tens of thousands of dollars. At first, Michael refused to believe it. But as Sophie laid out the numbers, unauthorized expenses, money being siphoned from company accounts, it became undeniable. Michael stormed to his father's house that night, fury burning in his veins. You let Alex steal from the company? Michael's voice shook with rage. His father, sitting in his old chair, barely looked up. Watch your tone. Watch my? Dad, he's robbing us. He borrowed it, his father said evenly. He needed some money. He's going to pay it back. Michael stared at him, struggling to process the words. You knew. He told me about it before he did it. And you let him? He's your brother, Michael. Michael's stomach twisted. It wasn't just Alex who had betrayed him. It was his own father. He took money out of the company account like it was his personal bank, Michael said, voice shaking. He could have bankrupted us. And you, what? You just let him? Because he's Alex. Their father sighed like Michael was being dramatic. He's going through a rough time. Michael laughed bitterly. A rough time? He's been going through a rough time his entire life, because you've never made him take responsibility for anything. Michael, his father said, tone turning warning. I won't have you talking about your brother like that. I should have seen this coming, Michael muttered. No matter what I do, no matter how much I sacrifice, you'll never see me the way you see him. You're different, his father said simply. That was it. Not an apology. Not an ounce of regret. Just a statement of fact. Michael had spent years trying to prove himself, trying to earn something that would never be given. And in that moment, he realized he had wasted his time. He walked out of that house without another word. That night, he sat with Sophie, hands clenched in his lap. I don't know how much more of this I can take. Sophie took a deep breath. Then maybe it's time to stop taking it. Michael exhaled slowly, the weight of decades pressing down on him. Maybe Sophie was right. Maybe it was time to stop cleaning up Alex's mess. Maybe it was time to stop waiting for his father's approval. Maybe it was time to finally walk away. Alex was broke again. Michael wasn't even surprised when it happened. It was inevitable. Alex's entire life was a cycle of failure, bailouts, and second chances that no one else in the world would have been given. This time, it was some investment scheme he had been bragging about for weeks, promising it would be his big break. He had thrown everything into it, what little savings he had left, borrowed money from their father, and probably scammed a few gullible friends. And just like every other time, it ended in disaster. The moment Alex admitted he was out of money, their father stepped in to save him. Again. He needs stability, their father said. He's not cut out for fieldwork, but he can still help the business. He just needs some structure. Michael clenched his jaw. And by structure, you mean another job he won't do? He'll be in the office. Sophie can train him. His father continued, as if Michael hadn't said anything at all. She's already good at handling schedules and contracts. She'll make sure he gets the hang of it. Michael wanted to argue, to tell his father this was a terrible idea, that Alex would find a way to ruin even a desk job. But he was exhausted. He had been fighting the same fight for years. What was the point? So he let it happen. At first, it was exactly what he expected. Alex sat at his desk pretending to work, taking long lunches, disappearing early. But then, something changed. Alex started caring. It was subtle at first. He started showing up on time, which was already shocking enough. But then came the other things. He started dressing better. Not sloppy, but deliberately put together. Pressed shirts, good shoes. He even started wearing cologne, something Michael had never seen him do in his entire life. Michael noticed, but he shrugged it off. Maybe, for once, Alex was taking something seriously. Maybe this job was forcing him to grow up. But then came the real red flags. Sophie started spending more time at the office, saying Alex needed more training. Michael didn't think much of it at first. Sophie was always hands-on when it came to work. But it became excessive. She was staying late, coming in early, constantly talking about how Alex was improving and how they should give him more chances. She would shut down any criticism Michael had about his brother, defending him in ways she never had before. That's just how he is, Michael. You need to be patient. She had never said that before. Michael shook it off. He told himself he was just being paranoid. But then, Sophie changed her phone password. That stopped him cold. They had always shared their passwords. Not because they were controlling or suspicious, but because it was practical. If one of them needed something in an emergency, they could access each other's phones. And now, suddenly, she had changed hers. Michael asked her about it. She barely looked up from her laptop. Oh, I just wanted more privacy. Privacy? Michael didn't know why that single word sent a cold wave through him, but it did. Then there was the receptionist. She had worked for the company for years, quiet and professional, never one to get involved in gossip. But lately, she had been giving Michael strange looks. Not pitying, exactly. Just uneasy. Like she wanted to say something but couldn't. Once, he caught her staring at him as he walked through the office. When their eyes met, she immediately looked away. Michael didn't ask. He didn't want to know. He ignored all of it. He told himself he was imagining things, that he was reading too much into coincidences. Sophie wouldn't do this to him. Alex wouldn't dare. But doubt had already taken root in his mind, whispering in the back of his head, no matter how hard he tried to silence it. Michael's phone rang late in the evening. He was in the middle of reviewing invoices at the kitchen table, the numbers blurring together after another exhausting day at work. Sophie's name flashed across the screen. Something was wrong. The moment he picked up, he heard her sobbing. Deep, gasping breaths, the kind of crying that made his stomach tighten with dread. Michael, she choked out. I need to tell you something. Please, just listen. His grip on the phone tightened. What happened? I'm pregnant. A pause. His heartbeat slammed in his ears. This should have been good news. They had talked about kids, about starting a family. But the way she was crying told him everything. There's a chance it's not yours. His entire body went cold. Michael didn't even have to ask. He already knew. Alex. His own brother. He didn't say a word. He couldn't. The silence stretched between them, thick and suffocating. Sophie broke first. It wasn't supposed to happen, she whispered. I didn't mean. How long? Michael finally asked, his voice dangerously low. 3, maybe 4 months, she admitted, barely above a whisper. 4 months. The late nights at the office. The changed phone password. The way she defended Alex, the way he suddenly started caring about his appearance. The receptionist's strange looks. Michael had ignored all of it. He had convinced himself he was just paranoid. And now, his fiancée was pregnant with his brother's child. Michael inhaled sharply. Did you tell him? Sophie hesitated. That was all the confirmation he needed. She had already told Alex. Before him. Something in Michael snapped. He hung up without another word, grabbed his keys, and walked out the door. He didn't think. He just drove. His hands were locked onto the steering wheel, white-knuckled, his jaw clenched so hard it hurt. His mind was a storm of rage, betrayal, and the sickening realization that the two people he trusted most had been lying to his face for months. His car skidded to a stop in front of his parents' house. Michael barely registered his father standing in the driveway, looking up in surprise as he marched past him, straight through the front door. Alex was there, lounging on the couch like he had no worries in the world. A beer in his hand, TV remote in the other. Michael didn't even hesitate. The first punch landed hard, snapping Alex's head back. The beer crashed to the floor, foam splattering everywhere. Jesus Christ! Alex sputtered, clutching his face, blood already dripping from his nose. Michael wasn't done. He grabbed Alex by the shirt and slammed him against the wall. You think this is funny? He growled. My fiancé? My future? You just had to ruin that too? Michael, stop this, their father's voice boomed. He was already between them, yanking Michael away before he could land another hit. Michael shoved his father off. You knew, didn't you? He demanded. Or are you about to tell me this was another mistake Alex needed to be forgiven for? His father's face was unreadable, but the hesitation in his eyes was enough. Michael let out a bitter laugh. Unbelievable. Alex wiped the blood from his nose, scowling. It wasn't just me, man. She wanted it too. That did it. Michael lunged again, but their father stepped between them, shoving him back. Enough, their father snapped. We are going to handle this as a family. Michael stared at him, breath heaving. You still want to protect him? His voice was hoarse with fury. His father didn't answer. Michael let out a slow, trembling breath. He turned, shaking his head, and walked out the door. For the first time in his life, he was done. Michael sat in silence in his father's living room, his fists clenched so tightly his nails dug into his palms. His father sat across from him, looking calm, too calm for someone who had just watched his eldest son break his youngest son's nose. Alex, still dabbing at the blood with a tissue, was smirking slightly, like this was nothing more than another minor inconvenience. And Sophie wouldn't even look at him. She sat with her head down, her hands trembling in her lap. Michael had walked in here expecting, what? An apology? Acknowledgement that what had happened was unforgivable? Some shred of decency from his father, proving that, for once, he wouldn't side with Alex? He should have known better. His father cleared his throat. This isn't the end of the world, he began, like he was discussing a minor business setback rather than the complete betrayal of his son. Michael laughed. A short, humorless sound. Not the end of the world? My fiancée is pregnant with my brother's kid. I think that qualifies as the end of something. His father held up a hand, as if Michael was being unreasonable. We're going to fix this. As a family. Michael had heard that line before. Every time Alex screwed up, every time Michael was expected to clean up after him. His father leaned forward. The solution is simple. Sophie and Alex need to get married. The words slammed into Michael like a brick to the chest. He blinked. What? They're having a child. That child needs stability. A family. Michael turned to Sophie, searching her face for some kind of reaction. For any sign that she wasn't okay with this. But she just sat there, her face pale, her body stiff. Alex, on the other hand, had the audacity to look amused. Michael exhaled sharply, trying to keep his voice steady. You think the solution to them betraying me is to reward them with a wedding? His father ignored his tone. It's the logical step. Michael laughed again, but this time it came out raw, almost wild. Logical? He looked at Sophie. Is this what you want? Sophie swallowed hard, but she didn't answer. That was answer enough. Michael ran a hand over his face, exhaling sharply. Unbelievable. His father wasn't finished. Alex is also going to take over the business. Michael froze. You'll train him, his father continued, as if this was just another normal business decision. He's finally stepping up and he needs guidance. You'll make sure he's ready to run things. Michael stared at him, stunned. Then, slowly, he turned to Alex. The smug, self-satisfied look on his face told him everything. Michael's voice was dangerously quiet. You're handing him my company. Our company, his father corrected. No, Michael said, his voice sharper now. My company. I built it. I kept it alive. I ran it while you made excuses for him. His father sighed, as if Michael was being difficult. It was always meant to be a family business, Michael. You'll still be involved. You'll help Alex transition. Michael almost laughed at the absurdity of it. His father actually expected him to train the man who had stolen everything from him. But his father wasn't done. We're also giving Alex a house, he added. Michael's stomach dropped. Excuse me. His father waved a hand, as if this was a minor detail. A fresh start for the baby. I'm helping with the down payment. Michael felt his entire body go cold. His father was rewarding Alex. For everything. For stealing Michael's fiancée. For humiliating him. For ruining his future. He was handing him Michael's business. Giving him a house. And Michael was expected to sit back and take it. To be the bigger person. To help. Michael let out a slow breath. He looked at Sophie again. At Alex. At the father who had spent his entire life making excuses for the golden son who could do no wrong. Then, he laughed. A real laugh this time. Sharp. Bitter. You know what? He stood, shaking his head. Go to hell. His father's expression darkened. Michael. No, Michael cut him off, his voice calm now. You've spent your whole life cleaning up his messes, but this one? This one's on you. He turned to Alex, tilting his head. Good luck running the company. Let's see how long it takes before you burn it to the ground. Alex opened his mouth, but Michael was already walking away. And Sophie finally looked up. Michael, please. But Michael didn't stop. He walked out the front door, got into his car, and drove away. And for the first time in his life, he didn't look back. Michael walked away from everything. He quit the family business the very next day. No dramatic speeches, no second chances, just a simple resignation letter left on his father's desk. It wasn't even a real company anymore. It was just another one of Alex's playgrounds, another thing their father had handed to him with zero effort. Instead of wasting another minute there, Michael accepted a job offer from a competitor, a bigger company that had been trying to recruit him for years. They paid him nearly double what he had been making, gave him full benefits, and actually valued his expertise. But the real victory? Most of the company's best clients left with him. They didn't trust Alex. They never had. They had stayed with the family business because of Michael, because he was the one who showed up, who got the work done right. The moment they heard he was leaving, they followed. It was almost too easy. Michael didn't bother checking in on Alex or Sophie. He didn't want updates, didn't care what happened to them. But even without looking, he still heard things. 2 weeks after he quit, Alex and Sophie got married. A courthouse wedding. No big ceremony. No celebration. Just some paperwork and signatures, like they were starring in some twisted, rushed love story instead of one built on betrayal. Michael couldn't believe how fast they did it, how easy it was for them to move on, to pretend that what they had done was normal. He didn't care. He had his own plans. Instead of wasting time on the past, Michael threw himself into his work, using his free time to pursue his master electrician license. It was grueling, with long hours of studying, exams, and practical tests, but he didn't mind. He had spent his entire life proving himself, and now he was doing it for himself. Not for his father, not for Alex. Just him. Months passed. Then the call came. It was late at night when his phone rang, and for a second, Michael almost ignored it. But when he saw his father's name on the screen, something inside him told him to pick up. The voice on the other end wasn't the confident, controlling man he had grown up with. It was desperate. Michael, his father breathed. I need your help. Michael sat back, letting the silence stretch. He already knew. The business was collapsing. Alex had run it into the ground faster than anyone could have predicted. The mistakes weren't small ones. They were catastrophic. 2 major clients had filed lawsuits after Alex botched commercial jobs, causing dangerous electrical hazards that nearly led to fires. Thousands of dollars were missing from the company's accounts. Alex had stolen money, again, and disappeared. Insurance had lapsed under Alex's leadership, leaving the company financially exposed to everything. And worst of all, the house their father had so proudly bought for Alex and Sophie was in foreclosure. Michael didn't say anything. He just listened to his father beg. I know I made mistakes, his father admitted. I should have never trusted him with this. I should have listened to you. Michael exhaled slowly. And his father hesitated. Come back, please. Take over the business. Fix it. Michael laughed. He actually laughed. You really think I'd come back? His father's silence told him everything. No, Michael said, his voice firm. This is exactly what you deserve. Live with it. He hung up. He thought that would be the end of it. But then Sophie messaged him. At first, he almost deleted the text without reading it. But something made him pause. It was long, desperate, and it started with, "The baby is yours. DNA confirmed." Michael's chest tightened, his hand gripping the phone harder. He had spent months telling himself the child wasn't his, convincing himself to move forward, to forget. But now it was real. Still, that wasn't why she was messaging. Sophie was in trouble. Alex had taken every dollar from their joint account and disappeared, leaving her alone with nothing. No money, no home, no job. She begged Michael for help, told him she had made a mistake, said she needed him. Michael stared at the message for a long time. Then, he typed a response. "We'll settle everything through lawyers and court. Don't contact me again." Then, he blocked her number. A week later, his father showed up in person. Michael opened the door to see a man he barely recognized. His father, once so proud and strong, looked defeated. His clothes were wrinkled, his face pale. "I'll give you everything," his father said immediately. "The business. 100% ownership. It's yours. Just save it." Michael didn't answer right away. He just studied his father, this man who had spent his entire life putting Alex first, who had let him walk away broken and betrayed, only to come crawling back when he needed him. "No," Michael finally said. "You made your choice. Live with it." His father's face crumbled. "Michael, please." "No." His father swallowed hard. His shoulders slumped. "Your mother, she's struggling." That hit differently. His mom had always been there. Quiet. Loyal. Stuck in the middle. Michael sighed. "She can stay with me if she wants." But she didn't. His mother refused to leave his father, choosing to go down with the sinking ship. And so Michael walked away. For good. Alex never resurfaced. He had run from his failures, again. Probably hiding somewhere, waiting for another sucker to bail him out. Michael moved on. He focused on his career, on himself, on a future that was his and his alone. And for the first time in his life, he was free.